What rule was implemented because of you? Years ago, I bought a computer from Dell. I paid for it with my debit card and excitedly monitored the build status every day, checking in at work and on my days off going to the library to check on expected shipping updates. When I made the purchase, it was a 5 to 7 day expectation for delivery. At day 10, when it had gone from order accepted to order prep to order built, it suddenly went back to order accepted. Stage 1. I called their customer service line and was told there had been a glitch in the system and the order got expedited and soon was back at order built and I was just waiting on shipping confirmation. The next day, back to order accepted again. This happened every day for 5 days. Cue another call to customer service. Apparently, there was a problem with payment and they referred me back to my bank because the payment was on hold. Called my credit union and they told me it was just an authorization hold waiting on final confirmation from the merchant. Called Dell back and they saw the same thing, but even the customer service director couldn't say why it hadn't finalized, but every time the payment didn't finalize they literally took the box with the computer off the loading dock and sent it back to stage 1, again and again and again. This led to a long hold while the customer service director looked into their billing system and ended up transferring me to a very nice lady in their accounting department. Initially, she thought I was an in-house person from the listing dock asking about a customer's order, but quickly got up to speed. She was covering for a coworker who helped with in-house billing system troubleshooting who was out on vacation and usually just handled tracking the accounting from Dell sending parts from one warehouse and factory to another. But she dug in and figured out that the issue was that I was paying with a debit card, not a credit card. Now, debit cards were still relatively new. Most banks capped the amount you could spend per day at $250 to $500, but my credit union was one of only 5 financial institutions that didn't cap it at all. They proudly noted on a monthly statement insert that the credit union felt that it was your money to manage the way you wanted to. However, Dell didn't accept debit cards at all. Not for a dime. Not for the $800 I was trying to spend. The nice lady in accounting, however, had just come back from a conference and knew that there was a push to gain more banks to act like my credit union and remove their spending caps. She told me to hang tight and she was going to get it done for me. I told her I could change my payment method to a credit card, but she told me that would delay the whole process. 2 days later, I got a call from her. She had made a presentation to the CEO, CFO, and several VPs making the case that Dell needed to get ahead of the curve and start accepting debit cards with no spending limits because the banking rules were going to be changing very soon and more people were going to be spending money with Dell the way I tried to. They had to implement a process to start accepting debit cards, which had required a rush overnight change from their merchant bank, and my purchase was their test case. She had me check with my credit union, who showed the funds were officially a purchase and not just an authorization hold. Then she called the loading dock and made sure my computer was on a track. Within 10 minutes I had an email with a tracking number. Marbles being banned at my elementary school. I vaguely remember the convoluted rules we had for playing marbles in 3rd grade, but one that was written in stone was that if you lost a game, you had to throw away a marble of your own. This often drew a crowd of participants eager to get their tiny hands on a free marble. One day, I lost a game and was forced to throw a marble away. We called it scrambling. I had stupidly agreed to offer up as ante for the game my prize boulder, a heavy marble with intricately woven colors that was about the size of a golf ball. When it was time to throw it away, a large crowd of kids had gathered, impatiently jeering me to toss it and start the melee. I took one last look at my boulder and, in a surge of 8-year-old rage, launched it with all my strength. I still remember it gleaming against the deep blue sky as it left my hand. It sailed, flew over the group's head, their mouths agape in amazement. It flew until it struck some poor blonde kid in the head, who was just walking along kicking dandelions, totally oblivious to the incoming projectile. It hit him hard. To this day I still recall the way his head snapped back in Zapruder-like fashion. He dropped instantly, like a bag of old socks. We all scattered to the 4 corners of the playground as teachers ran to his side. The following day a letter was sent home to every parent, banning all marbles. Poor blondie McMarblehead, I forget his name. This was 32 years ago. Was off school for about a week. Edit. Spelling. Edit #2. I'm getting lots of questions about what happened to the marble. It was confiscated by the teachers. My friends reminded me, to my horror, that it had my fingerprints on it. I had many sleepless nights worrying that the marble would incriminate me. At one point I developed an elaborate scheme to break into the principal's office and retrieve it. By elaborate, I mean I planned to eat a ton of tuna because it had made me vomit once before and use that to get access to the nurse's office, which was adjacent to the principal's. Then I would pretend to need to vomit again, rush to her garbage can directly next to the desk, and swipe the marble. Thankfully our school flooded several days later, and I quickly forgot about the incriminating evidence. After having my 2 front teeth replaced. Band director. Okay. I never thought I'd have to say this, but wrestling is not allowed in the band room. At Boy Scout summer camp, as a scout master. No campfire flames higher than 24 inches. Turns out that, if you make a 5-foot tower out of only the 1/4 inch dowels from small American flags, you get a straight and narrow column of flame about 30 feet high. I was the Clark Griswold of Scout Masters. Not me, but someone I worked security with at the G20 summit. Long story short, we were screeners at the entrance. Our X-ray machine, like the one you'd see at the airport, with a treadmill type bit pulling beans through some hanging rubber guards into the X-ray, was a hassle. See, the issue was, most delegates had very little to put through. A watch, a belt, a wallet, the odd item here and there. The curtains were pretty stiff. So the issue was, with only these light items in the bin, it could never get through the curtains. Their weight was greater, so it just spun on the treadmill stuck before them. One of the geniuses on a team next to me came up with a solution. We shall take 6 water bottles and tape them together in a bowling pin style triangle with black duct tape. This will weigh down the bin so it can get through. And I must admit it worked. Like twice. Until the next delegate mistook it for a bomb. And picture it, 6 bottles with no labels and some fluid in them black taped together. The RCMP got involved. It was a whole scene. No custom McJavaras weights are to be used by screeners any longer. Not a rule, but a bunch of signs were put up in front of my school because I got hit by a car in the crosswalk. In my sophomore year of high school during the short World War I unit, the sophomore history teachers had an event where we went out to the football field and played one flag capture the flag using dodgeball rules. One team had the flag and had trenches made of football training equipment, and the other team had to charge across no man's land and touch the flag to win. Occasionally the teachers would call out a gas attack and everyone would have to don paper bag gas masks or they were out. I had the genius plan of charging the main trench directly without a dodgeball to try to neutralize it to help my team. I handed my ball to a classmate and instead wielded a cardboard trench shovel I had made that morning, and then put on my gas mask ahead of time. When it was time to go over the top, I barreled towards the main trench. Think that one Battlefield 1 trailer, where the British soldier does the same thing with a club, but this was 2 years before that game came out. I miraculously was never hit on my way to it, and slammed into that thing with all of my might, taking it down, knocking a couple other kids over, and knocking myself out for a few seconds in the process. The teachers thought it was hilarious, but they quickly had to implement a no trench busting rule after someone else tried to replicate my antics during the next round. Unfortunately, as far as I'm aware, that was the last year they did that event. In my first year of university I took philosophy as an elective, and our professor said on the first day that he was easygoing and didn't mind if assignments were late and wouldn't dock points. I turned all 8 papers he assigned into him the day of our final exam. True to his word, he graded them all fairly and didn't deduct points for lateness. I took a class with him the next year, and on the first day he said that due to past events he'd accept a late assignment only with a note from a doctor, or if someone died while making eye contact with me. Not taking shelter while a tornado is on the ground is considered insubordination. Edit. Lol, it's not much of one. I was working late to meet some deadlines and my job allows flex time. So basically I can work up to 4 hours extra spread out over the week and bail 4 hours early on another day, as long as it's the same pay period and I arrange it in advance. I had to get this stuff in before deadline or I could not leave early the next day. So I was working extra BC. I had a doctor app coming up. It's like 6:30 PM when the sirens go off. There are maybe 20 of us still in the building and people go into the stairway. A few people just go home. So I tell a co-worker I'm not going to seek shelter and I'll be working. Cool NP. Well, I'm working when around 7 PM the sirens are going off again and there is a dude coming from the tech department making sure everyone seeks shelter. I don't recognize him, but whatever, we go through tech people like no one's business. He tells me to seek shelter. I say unless it's in the handbook I'm not doing, I have work to do. We have long stare. He says something about the tornado being X far away, and I'm like, I know, I saw it earlier out the other window. It's just a baby one, won't even break glass and it's not heading this way. Long stare. He seeks shelter. See him as I leave around 8 PM and he says something along the lines of looks like I was right about handbook and tornado being small, but it was a giant legal risk if I had been wrong. Found out the next day that dude was a CFO. He had the handbook amended so anyone who left the building or didn't seek shelter would be considered insubordinate. In college we had a shuttle van that would carry you from your dorm to your car after dark. I got dropped off at my car and crossed in front of the van. The shuttle driver was on his phone not paying attention and started to drive. I felt the hood and grill start pushing into my shoulder and hip and was able to scream and flail to get his attention before he ran me over. Now they have to go both ways down each row of cars in the parking lots to only let people out on the passenger side. During the annual canned food drive at my high school you can bring ramen noodles, but they no longer count towards the total donated for the competition between the classes. This rule is from when I was a junior. They did all sorts of various competitions between the classes and of course the seniors always won nearly everything. Well, during the food drive the juniors concocted a plan to win the event. Instead of bringing in food we would collect money and a handful of people would hold it all until near the end. It would look like we were losing because our totals would be low, but then on the last day they'd bring in a huge supply and we'd surpass them with the win. They wouldn't know how well we were actually doing until it was too late to do anything about it. I wasn't one of the money people, but a couple of them were friends of mine. The plan was to buy as much food as they could with the money they'd collected, so naturally they bought ramen noodles because it's the cheapest thing in the store. I don't know how much money they had, but I think they must have gotten special order shipments in. On the last day of the drive, when I came in there was a room full of pallets of noodles stacked 5 feet high. I was completely blown away. It was an insane amount of ramen. Based on the number of items brought in we had like double the sophomores and seniors combined. It was nuts.